Yes, there has been, for almost the past 100 years, a deliberate effort made to actually use education to captivate the majority of American citizens to a working-class existence. Charlotte Iserby writes in The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, "The mind of the average American became trained or conditioned to accept the idea that education exists solely for the purpose of getting a good job in the global workforce economy. School, according to John Taylor Gatto, was looked upon from the first decade of the 20th century as a branch of industry and a tool of governance. But did it stop then after the era of the Rockefellers and the Carnegies? Hardly. The U.S. Department of Labor under the first Bush presidency released a statement that said, 'All schools must bend single-mindedly to the task of socializing a skilled workforce.' So the history of education in America tells a story of the takeover of our schools, first by socialists who saw government as the way to assure universal compliance with their plan to perfect mankind and to produce a heaven on earth, and then by big business and banking interests who saw the government-controlled schools as a means to always have a willing and compliant workforce. Most citizens today have been brought up in a government-controlled school, and now they have almost inbred in them the idea that education is properly a natural role of the government. The government certainly wants us to continue to think that way, for it believes that it also has a vital role to play in educating our children. According to Stanford University political science professor Rob Reich, the state has an independent interest in education for citizenship that may not be shared by parents. What is that independent interest? Well, the U.S. Department of Education says that education is a means to achieve important economic and social goals of a national character. The economic goals are to satisfy the demands of industry by keeping a steady stream of workers graduating and flowing into the world's widget factories. The social goals, which remember were the first reason given to bring the schools under the control of the state, are to satisfy the social liberals among us who believe in the perfectibility of man and the attainment of a heaven on earth. Remember, according to Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, it takes a village to raise a child. And if some other member of the village has a different opinion about what we should do with our children and their education and upbringing, we could well be outvoted. But we already are being outvoted. According to William Sewell, professor of education at the University of Virginia, each child belongs to the state. What is the state's goal for the education of our children? Professor Sewell identified it when he described the purpose of education as, quote, "the training of citizens for the state so the state may be perpetuated," unquote. Just as it takes trained human resources to keep an industry alive, so it takes trained cooperative subjects to keep the state alive. State control of education is not some new plan that was just formulated yesterday. It's been around quite a while, and it is certainly not unique to America. And it was not found only in Germany before it was brought here. Fascist dictator Benito Mussolini of Italy also had a pretty good handle on state-run education when he said, "At every hour of every day, I can tell you on what page of which book each schoolchild in Italy is studying." And whether or not we as parents like the idea of the state dictating what our children should learn and controlling how our tax dollars are spent that pay for this education, that is exactly the program that is now being carried out in every tax-supported school in America. Professor Reich sees three parties with an interest in education: the parents, the state, and the child himself. But he says that parental authority must end when its exercise compromises the development of minimal autonomy in children. If parental authority over education does not conduce to the self-sufficiency and independence of their children, the state must step in and ensure such outcomes. This is the statist view, that in the education equation, only the state is sovereign. We are all products of the education that we have received. Since the socialist statists took over the teacher colleges in the early 1800s, many generations of teachers have been trained to share the views of those who engineered the replacement of the sovereign home with the sovereign state. Most teachers are dedicated, hard-working, and devoted to bettering their students in their classroom. But if the entire system is flawed, from the programs that they're trained to teach and the methods that they're taught to use to the textbooks that they're given to teach from, then the end result, through no fault of the teachers, cannot help but be flawed as well. Teaching's a noble profession, and the changes that were made to bring education under the control of the state were not made under the initiative of teachers. Only since the early 1900s has there been a voice that purported to speak for the teachers that can be said to be working against the interests of the parents and for the interests of the statist socialists. That occurred when the National Education Association, the NEA, joined with the banker-industrialists and conspired to push onto children a set of values very different from the ones their parents would have chosen had they been given all of the facts. This education elite began preaching a much different role for teachers than most of us envision when we think of the little red schoolhouse with an apple on the teacher's desk. A popular 1928 teacher college textbook entitled A Sociological Philosophy of Education claimed, "It is the business of teachers to run not merely schools, but the world." Those who taught the teachers were not dedicated to teaching our children academic knowledge, the thing that we usually think school is supposed to be dedicated to. This deletion was originally designed by the socialists, but it came to be adopted as well by the education elites as they became thoroughly socialist themselves. In 1929, Edward Thorndike from Columbia Teachers College said, in fact, academic subjects are of little value. Today, many people doubt that they are qualified to teach their own children because of their lack of academic training. And usually the first question that is raised by the government school system about parents teaching their own children at home does concern academic qualifications of the parents. Yet here, one of the universally recognized leaders in teacher training said that academic subjects really are of little value, that other things mattered more. Other things like running the world.